There are so many stories people place onto survivors before we ever get the chance to tell our own. Stories about what survival is supposed to look like, stories about who gets to be soft, who gets to be angry, who gets to want more, who gets to take up space, and who gets to be seen as layered and whole instead of broken. This project takes the idea of the seven deadly sins and asks us to look again. So, this is not just a story about sin. This is the seven deadly sins reimagined. Pride. Pride is often framed as arrogance, as vanity, as too much. The flip of pride is self worth, the right to say, I am still here, I am still valuable, I'm still deserving of care, respect, safety, and softness.
Hi, I'm Betty. I'm a survivor and a professional dominatrix and caretaker. When I think of pride, um, what it taught me was that you could find yourself in many different forms at different times of your life, depending on where your healing is at. What it cost me was some people along the way who didn't like me growing. When healing, it can be very lonely sometimes. And no matter how you may portray yourself when you're masking out in the world and just surviving, the chapter that people don't see of my survivorship is being with myself when discovering myself and rediscovering who I was. And the part behind the scenes is the loneliness that can bring sometimes when you're having to sit within your pain and your survival and what you're doing to heal. I was rediscovering myself in different ways in different parts of my healing. I had started performing on stages and reclaiming ownership in my body and who I was and my comfort levels and respecting my boundaries there. That healing doesn't ever stop. You're constantly healing and you can be triggered at any moment and have to reevaluate that, sit with that discomfort and reheal all over again. It doesn't ever change and doesn't ever stop. I would like them to feel pride in their body and ownership in their body and to place those boundaries and stick to them and feel strong in that.
Greed. Greed is often described as wanting too much, but survivors are constantly told to make themselves smaller, smaller in what they ask from the world. The flip of greed is permission to want more, more safety, more peace, more pleasure, more room. My name is Jiminika. I'm a survivor as well as the founder of Tending the Garden. When I think about greed, I think about needing to just exist and to survive, which, as we know, is a part of the survivorship because I'm still here, which a lot of us aren't. And for me, that looked like trying to figure out how to exist and find different modalities. I went spiritual first to figure out how to ground into my body. I eventually went to therapy because I needed help. And so for me, what it was everything. Like you have to be greedy sometimes to take up space. And so I love being greedy. And I think it has changed the way that I look at survivors. I think it's changed the way that I navigate work. I think it's changed the way that I exist because we're allowed to take up space. And oftentimes society looks at us as this perfect survivor that isn't greedy. We should be greedy. Everyone should be greedy about the ways that we take care of ourselves and the way that we love ourselves. Sloth. Sloth is usually labeled as laziness. The flip of sloth is sacred rest, a reminder that stillness can be healing and rest can be its own form of survival.
Hi, my name is Jace Barron. I am a film producer, creator, advocate, human being. Sloth, um, which we're reimagining as rest, um, to me is a really big deal of the healing process. It's something that I have forced myself to do at times. You know, I'm a very active person. I like to keep myself busy, and staying busy sometimes is also a distraction from just looking at yourself in the mirror. Um, and rest is such a huge, important part of just recuperating your nervous system, um, just being whole. You know, I think about when I was dealing with the emotional part of my journey, And I did the thing of just bulldozing through life and going to work, showing up with friends, going to parties, and then without the rest I needed to recoup, the whole thing just kind of exploded. And I responded physically to something I was holding onto inside without me even knowing. And it just took a lot for me to just do the work and just sit my butt down and look at myself and figure it out. And that meant therapy. Um, that meant just resting, sleeping, um, reevaluating my choices in life, what's in my life that doesn't serve me, and what do I want more of. So a lot of my survivor story has been lived very loudly. Um, I shared my story almost 10, actually over 10 years ago now, and I shared it online, and it garnered 600,000 views, and then ultimately a million within a couple weeks. And because of that, I have done advocacy work for the state capitol, um, on the federal level as well as locally. And so a lot of my survival story has been very lived out loud. I mean, I get asked to speak a lot of times. I would say 90% of those inquiries are about my survival story. Um, with that, the behind the scenes is work. Yeah, it's the rest that I was talking about. It's the recovery. It's the saying no. You know, a lot of I've been talking about this for now a decade, and I would say about a year ago I realized that I just can't keep saying yes. I want to help, 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 help. But then I got to a point where I had to look at myself and what was good for me. And so I just started saying no to things that weren't serving me at the time. And I felt bad about those things sometimes, but I had to kind of put myself first in those scenarios. I think a lot of people deem being a survivor as this sloth, like walk through life. And, sometimes it does get that, but people are just living their lives and loving, crying, going to the movies, doing those things. It's become a superpower. Like I said, I'm here today talking with you, sharing the story, because the more we talk about these things, the more we normalize it. We normalize the healing process. We normalize being a survivor, and there's a lot of different components to it when it comes to laws, when it comes to dating, when it comes to sex. Those are all kind of intertwined and weave, but we have to start the conversation somewhere.
Wrath. Wrath is the one people fear most, especially when it lives in the body of people who are expected to stay quiet. The flip of wrath is righteous anger, the kind of anger that tells the truth, the kind that protects, the kind that helps us leave, speak, grieve, and rebuild.
When I hear wrath, the chapter that it opens is one in which I had no agency. I felt powerless. I felt alone. This chapter holds resentment and a deep disdain for myself. This chapter cost me my peace of mind, the connection to myself, and my power. And it taught me that I needed to honor and love myself deeply as well. When I step into the opposite, I'm writing the chapter of freedom. Freedom from holding on too tightly to things not meant for me, freedom to experience joy and ease, and freedom to love myself fully. If a survivor is watching this, I want them to feel seen and I want them to feel at ease in their body.
Gluttony. Gluttony is often named as too much hunger or too much appetite, too much need. But survivors know what it means to live with emptiness, with scarcity, with the fear that safe things may not come again. The flip of gluttony is hunger without shame, a hunger for nourishment, for joy, for touch, for rest, for fullness. Survivorship is hard, and every day is a fight. So I think that's what people don't see. They see me on the internet and doing my little videos or speaking at a college, not realizing how much work I've had to do to exist in that space. I've been studying psychology since I was 16. I was a rape crisis counselor. I've worked in every kind of facility, and I just kept seeing myself and all my people that I worked with. And so survivorship is also just about centering self for myself And the hard parts, I don't know, turning the news on, going on the internet, going outside. The things that people also don't notice is that fear of the what if and the when and those and heightened feelings. And that is just something that I don't think will ever change. I've just learned how to navigate it differently. My 27th year, that is what I would call the change. That was after I was like, oh, I keep fighting men at parties because I'm drunk, because they remind me of the person that harmed me. It took for my friends to be like, you can't keep blacking out at parties and fighting people. It took for me to navigate all that. It took for my grandmother to look at me and go, I don't know who you are anymore. And so it was not just one thing, it was multiple things. We aren't our trauma. Trauma is something that has happened to us and it's not all of us. And so if you are watching this and you are a survivor, I want you to continue being you and like figuring out what that looks like. Like, what people don't realize is there's so much grieving that also happens. And so people don't understand that. But to another survivor, I want to say, I see you and I get it. And grieving isn't clean and neither is existing. So one day at a time, kid, buckle up because every day is going to be different. Lust. Lust has long been used to shame desire, especially for people whose bodies have already been policed, violated, objectified, or controlled. The flip of lust is desire with agency, desire that is chosen, desire that is honest, desire that is not obligation, performance, or survival.
Hi, my name is Ben. I'm a bear, I'm a fairy, I'm an artist, and I'm a survivor. When I hear lust, it makes me think of the chapter in my survivorship before my assault happened. I was filled with lust before it happened, and because of that, I think I've demonized lust in the past, but I've really taken ownership over that and embraced my sexuality more fully and love expressing myself as a fully sexual, lustful being as a response to my survivorship and taking ownership over it. I think people don't see the moments of resilience that come from survivorship. There's so much happening internally when a trigger happens that people don't see. And it takes a lot of tools that I have in my toolbox from, years of processing and therapy that I've learned. And I think that's where resilience comes in. And it's something that's not visible, but it's very present in the mind of a survivor. I would call the chapter that shifted everything in my survivor journey the post pandemic breakup breakdown. I went through a horrible breakup right when the pandemic happened that just brought all of my trauma to a head. And I really took the time during the pandemic as like a personal retreat to do the therapy, to do the energy healing, to do the shadow work, to do all of the work of healing. And that really gave me the power to reclaim my story and really come to center in my survivorship. If a survivor is watching, I want them to feel a sense of calm in their body. I know being a survivor that we can get dysregulated in our nervous systems. And part of the biggest aspect of healing is learning how to regulate your nervous system and to feel that calm within yourself and come back to center. So that's what I would love someone to take away.
Envy. Envy is usually framed as resentment, but sometimes envy reveals what is missing, what matters, and what is deeply wanted. The flip of envy is revelation, not a flaw, not a failure, but an honest mirror of longing, grief, and need.
Hi, I'm Brianna Michelle. I'm a survivor and I'm the founder of Voices Beyond Assault. When I hear envy, it opens up a chapter of me envying the person that I was prior to my sexual assault. And then it also opens up a chapter of me also envying those who have not had to experience what I had to experience. What people don't see about my survivorship is the mirror effect. I always say that, looking in the mirror is who you are. You actually have to see yourself and see everything that's within you and all that and have to face yourself. And I feel like when you look in the mirror, it's a very honest um, perspective. And the mirror effect for me, I always say when I'm looking in the mirror, it takes a lot to be like, I love you. You're worth it. You're not what has happened to you before. And people don't see that side of what it takes to really look in the mirror, see yourself, love yourself, and then be able to leave and go out into the world and be everything that you want to be. And sometimes hiding and discarding a lot of things that you still feel internally. So I don't think people really see the solitude that we have and what we have to do to push forward and to keep going and to keep moving and to really just keep living and thriving past the trauma. I feel like a lot of times because we share our stories and we explain our stories, I feel like we're living in our victimization. No, we're sharing our stories to admit to the world and take our backpack off of ourselves and also admit to the world that this is who we are, but then look at who we are. If that makes any sense. It's being empowered and being resilient and being bold, and for some reason, sometimes they don't see that. They see us sharing our story as a weakness, and there's nothing weak about us sharing our story. The survivor watching, that's what I want them to feel in their body, is to know that they're more than their body. I want them to feel love in their body too. I feel like so often there's so much doubt and so many insecurities and so much that was taken from us. It causes us to not love ourselves the way that we should, and we give that love so freely to everyone else. So I would love a survivor to just see themselves, know that they're more than their body, and to love themselves.
I do not want you to think about sin in the way we've been taught to think about it. I want you to think about survival, not as a single story, but as a landscape. Because survivors are not made only for what hurt them. We are made of what we built after, what we carried, what we buried, what we reclaimed, what we are still learning to name. This project is an invitation to look again, to sit with complexity, to release shame where it does not belong, to let each doorway open into something fuller, deeper, and more honest. Not the deadly sins, the human truths behind them. And maybe in that reframing, we get a little closer to seeing survivors as we have always been. Powerful, layered, living works of art.